Okay, this shelf has armor on it. That means tanks and things. And some of it is 1/35th scale and some of it is 1/16th scale. And what you're looking at here is a very, very large German half-track that's very heavy duty. In this case, it's set up to pull tanks. It has a tank trailer on it here with a German PZKW4, I think, German tank. Maybe it's disabled, but this is a transport trailer and towing tractor. So yeah, that's 1/35th scale. Tiger 1 tank. Let's scan this up. And this is 1/16th scale. Focus here a little bit better. And this model is made by a company in China called Hobby Boss. And it was kind of toy-like, but I had to do several things to make it more accurate and more detailed. So I added a lot of what's called photo etch. That's small brass parts that are used to detail it. And turned out pretty nice. This is really the only game in town for a 1/16th scale Tiger 1 tank. Move over here a little bit. Unless you want to buy a radio controlled version made by Tamiya, which costs about 4 times more. And I didn't need that. You can see on the side of the turret there are spare tracks. This was a formidable weapon that the Germans deployed against the Allies. It carried an 88mm cannon, which was very effective. It could knock out pretty much anything at maybe about a mile distant, maybe more. The downside was it had a weak engine and transmission, and so they were often disabled. And the German military, the typical guys, were not very good at fixing things. And here is a 1/35th scale model of a Tiger 1 tank. You can see this is much smaller, but it's still well detailed, and it's a nice model. Okay, this is a 1/16th scale model of a very famous Russian tank model. It's a T-34 that they fielded in humongous numbers and was very successful for them. It was very reliable. It could go fast and far, and it had sufficient armor and a large enough gun. This particular model is upgunned. It has an 85mm cannon that made it much more effective against German tanks. This is made by all of these armor models are made by companies in China. This one is made by a company called Trumpeter. You can see the fuel spill there. Those are diesel drums for fuel. And let's look into the engine compartment. It's getting a little maintenance done there. Oh, wrong way. There we go. So that's a Russian T-34 tank. 1/35th scale model of a American half-track. And these were built by various automotive companies in the United States. And this was useful for carrying troops around in frontline situations. It's armored, and as you can see here, this one mounts like, it looks like 3 50 caliber machine guns, or maybe a couple of them are 30 caliber. This was highly effective in the field. Is a 1/35 scale Sherman tank, and this was the main tank that really the only tank that the Americans fielded in World War II in any numbers. There was a lot of variations on it. The plus side, it was very reliable, it could go fast and go far, and it was easy to maintain and fix. Had some downsides, the armor wasn't the best, and until they got the gun caliber large enough, you really had a hard time taking out German tanks with it. And it ran on gasoline, so it was more flammable, where the German tanks ran on diesel. But yeah, we fielded a lot of these tanks. A lot of them got destroyed. There was some given a moniker of like a death trap at first, and then they did some modifications to make it a little safer. And okay, this is a model of the USS Arizona, and it's 1/200th scale. This is again made by a Chinese company called Trumpeter, and the colors of the ship there are the colors that the USS Arizona had on December 7th, 1941. This particular ship was sunk by the Japanese with great loss of life, and it's a national memorial now. The hull is still underwater, and unfortunately there's a lot of guys entombed in it. The location of the tarps that you see here are where the tarps were located on that Sunday. They were put up for shade. And there's a lot of crew on there that I put on there, and some of them are going about their normal business, getting ready to go ashore for Sunday morning, church or whatever. And some of them are in the process of seeing the attacking Japanese aircraft. So that ship replicates the beginning of World War II for the United States, and the next ship kind of bookends that. This is a model in the same scale, 1/200th scale, of the USS Missouri. And this is as she looked 4 years later than the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1945. And this is pretty much what she looked like when she was in Tokyo Bay. And the Missouri is the ship that the Japanese leadership signed the instruments of surrender. There was a lot of dignitaries there. General MacArthur, General Wainwright, a lot of other admirals. And there's a lot of extra detail on this to make it more realistic. There's a lot of small parts on this. Anyway, this is our battleship as it looked when the Japanese signed their surrender documents. You can see there's a lot of difference in design between this and the Arizona behind it. Okay, the next level down on the shelving, the display case, is a 1/32nd model of the Vought SBU-1. It's a biplane that was developed and flown in the mid-1930s and was actually used up to 1941. And it's an enclosed canopy, I think one of the first for the Navy. And It's actually used as a dive bomber. This is a kit made by Luke Graf out of Poland, and it's made out of resin, so it's very heavy and somewhat more difficult to build because it's a short-run kit. But finished up to a very nice looking aircraft. I love yellow wing aircraft, and they just look so dashing, I guess. Quite different from normal planes. The next one over is a Sopwith triplane. It's used by the British in World War I, and was actually quite an effective fighter airplane. This particular model is in 1/32nd scale, and it's made by a company called Wingnut Wings out of New Zealand, and it's a company owned by Peter Jackson, who directed the movies about The Hobbit, Frodo, and all of his friends. So it's a very nice company that produces a beautiful model aircraft, and they're just a pleasure to build. I have not built any World War I airplanes since I was a kid, about 10 or 12, and so this was a lot of fun to get back into this. The next model is again another World War I airplane. This is a European-built model, I think, by the British, and it's this particular one is flown by American Marines, actually, and it's produced by the same company, Wingnut Wings, out of New Zealand, and this was a lot of fun to build. It was pretty detailed, and it has a pilot in front and a gunner in the back. And this was used both as a scout plane and a bomber aircraft. And speaking of bombers, we now turn our attention to this German World War I bomber. Same scale, 1/32nd. This is a AEG G4 early World War I bomber. It has twin engines, and it has a gunner in front where actually the commander sits, and in back of him is a cockpit where the pilot sits, and the commander can sit back there too. And I'll just turn this a little bit. And you can see there that in the back is another gunner. Now, the commander was normally supposed to command the airplane from the front cockpit, right in the nose, but they discovered that upon landing, a lot of these planes did a nose over, which would end in the death of the airplane commander. And so they judiciously decided to move back to sit next to the pilot during the landing part of their mission.